Have you ever noticed how some old trucks don't just drive past you? They stare back. It doesn't matter how many touchscreens or driver assist systems modern rigs have. There are a few classics that still feel more alive than anything rolling off the line today. So picture this. It's late at night on a lonely American highway. You hear that deep diesel growl long before you see the lights. The rumble shakes the ground. A cab-over silhouette cuts through the dark, and as it passes, you catch a glimpse of a driver with one hand on a giant steering wheel, the other on a long shifter. No screens, no lane assist, just man and machine. Ever wonder why trucks like that still have diehard fans, decades after they left the factory? Tonight, you and I are going on a road trip through time to meet 10 legendary American trucks that still put many modern machines to shame. Some of these rigs are so loved that people spend more on restoring them than they would on a brand new truck. Stick around, because the truck at the top of this journey is one that collectors will fight over just to park in a corner of their shop and polish on weekends. Let's fire it up. Let's start with a flat-nosed warrior that helped shape the look of American highways, the White Freightliner cab-over. Back in the 1950s and 60s, when highway length laws were strict, this cab-over engine design was a game-changer. By putting the cab right on top of the engine, fleets could run longer trailers without breaking the rules. It was compact, but it worked like a giant. Under the floor, you'd often find Detroit diesel two-stroke engines like the legendary 6-71 Screaming Jimmy, Tough Inline 6 used for decades in trucks, boats, and even military gear. Power numbers might sound small compared to today's 600 horsepower monsters, but the torque and reliability made these trucks heroes of coast-to-coast freight. Inside the cab, there were no frills, metal dash, simple gauges. The doghouse over the engine got warm, the ride was rough, and the noise was intense. But for the drivers, that sound was music. Today, a lot of these cab-overs are still turning up at classic truck shows, many still running the original Detroit power. And here's the crazy part. When a modern truck shuts down because a sensor went bad, there's nothing you can do but call a tow. In an old White Freightliner, a driver with a basic toolbox and some know-how could usually patch things up and get back on the road. That's why some old-school truckers still say a simple cab-over and a Screaming Jimmy will outlast most laptops on wheels. You think that's old school? The next truck turned work truck into Swiss Army knife on wheels. Now imagine a truck that could be anything you needed it to be. A city delivery rig on Monday, a farm helper on Tuesday, and a fire truck on Friday. That was the International Harvester, introduced in 1962 and built into the late 1970s. This medium-duty workhorse was everywhere in small-town America. Farmers used it with grain bodies. Cities used it as garbage trucks and fire engines. Schools turned its chassis into buses. Under the hood, you'd often find International Zone gasoline V8 South, like the famous 345 cubic inch around 5.6 to 5.7 liter engine, known for its thick iron block and long life rather than high revs. This wasn't an engine you babied, it was one you worked. The load ratings, gearing, and tough leaf spring suspension meant you could stuff the bed full, point it up a hill, and it would just keep pulling. Even today, you can still spot Lodestars quietly hauling firewood, hay, or farm equipment, often with faded paint but strong hearts. They're not still around because people forgot to replace them. They're still around because they're simple, cheap to keep running, and easy to fix under a tree with basic tools. Compare that to modern medium-duty trucks packed with electronics, proprietary diagnostic ports, and plastic parts. With a Lodestar, the check engine light was your ears and your nose. You listened for a knock, you sniffed for fuel, and you kept going. If that kind of self-reliance speaks to you, wait until you meet a truck that took toughness and added a serious dose of style. Now you're rolling into logging country, and you see it. A long hood beast, gleaming with chrome, tall stacks reaching for the sky, beefy axles and a stance that just screams, "Don't mess with me." That's the Western Star 4900. Born in the 1970s, and still in production in updated forms, the 4900 has become one of the longest-lasting heavy-duty platforms in North America, known for custom builds and serious durability. Unlike some mass-market trucks, Western Star built its reputation on ordering your rig like a tailored suit. You pick your frame, your axles, your engine, often big Detroit diesel or Cummins power end. The factory built the truck around your needs. In modern versions, you'll see engines like the Detroit DD15 and DD16, purpose-built for brutal loads and long days. But even the earlier 4900s had the same attitude. Overbuilt is just right. These rigs ran logging roads, mine sites, and mountain passes where one breakdown could ruin more than just your schedule. Inside, Western Star went further than most. Good insulation, quality seats, and nicer interiors than you'd expect from such a brutal machine. Old-school drivers loved that they could work all day and actually sleep without feeling like they'd been inside a steel drum. Today, fleets still buy modern 4900s, but you'll also see classic ones restored or still working. Frames straight, cabs solid. When a design survives decade after decade, that's not nostalgia. That's proof it was built right the first time. And if you think that's impressive, wait until you meet the truck that many drivers call the tank of the highway. Picture a rig that doesn't just look tough, it looks like it could drive through a wall and ask for seconds. That's the Diamond Rio, born from the merger of Diamond T and Rio in the late 1960s. Its square front, wide-set headlights and heavy bumper gave it a kind of military attitude, and that wasn't far from the truth. These trucks were built for serious work, heavy haul, construction, logging, and more. Under the hood, Diamond Rio offered Cummins and Detroit diesel engines that could push well over 300 horsepower in their day, more than enough for tough routes and big loads. Drivers liked them for a simple reason. You could beat on them and they wouldn't complain. The frames were heavy, the suspension simple and strong, and the cabs were basic but functional. Even when the original company struggled and changed hands, the trucks themselves just kept going. In some yards and small fleets, you'll still find an old Diamond Rio parked by the fence, covered in dust, waiting for someone to throw on a battery and wake it up. That's the kind of rig people call ugly when it's new and beautiful once it becomes rare. Modern trucks might win in fuel economy or comfort, but very few can match the way a Diamond Rio shrugged off abuse and kept pulling. But our journey isn't done. The next truck didn't just work hard, it was built almost like a custom piece of machinery for every buyer now. Imagine ordering a truck the way people order high-end sports cars. That was the spirit behind the Brockway 361, built by Brockway Motor Company in New York. This truck carried a reputation for handcrafted quality until the brand's end in the late 1970s. Many 361s came with Cummins diesel engines in the 200 to 300 horsepower range, known less for flash and more for running a million miles when maintained right. Drivers remember setups like 220 or 270 horsepower Cummins with multi-speed rears, perfect for climbing steep grades with heavy loads. The 361's steel chassis, tough suspension, and honest manual transmissions meant nothing stood between you and the road. Styling-wise, it had real character. A squared hood, bold grille bars, and twin headlights that gave it a serious but classy face. Many Brockways ran in the Northeast, hauling logs, machinery, and even serving as wreckers, because they were built in smaller numbers and tailored to customer needs. Each one had its own personality. Today, Brockway is gone, but its fan base is not. There's even a Brockway museum and dedicated truck shows where these rigs show up proudly restored, their owners telling stories about how these trucks just would not quit. In a world where many new trucks feel the same, the Brockway 361 is a reminder of something you don't see much anymore. Trucks built as individual tools, not just products. And speaking of would not quit, the next machine on our list was so tough, drivers still talk about it like it's a living thing. By now you've met trucks that worked the highways, the farms, the forests, and the mines. But the next one, it earned a reputation as the truck that simply refused to die, the Autocar DC series, especially the DC100 in the early 1950s. Autocar introduced DC to 100 dump and heavy-duty models aimed at off-road and construction work. These rigs used big Cummins diesels and heavy frames that could handle extreme loads day after day. They weren't pretty in the traditional sense. Big vertical grille, heavy bumper, and a cab that looked like a metal helmet. But that was the charm. If you drove one, you didn't care about looking sleek. You cared about getting 50 tons of rock out of a pit without breaking something. Many DC100s ran in quarries, on dam projects, and in industrial sites where failure was not an option. Today, some of them are fully restored, showing up at truck shows with fresh paint but original drivetrains still rumbling. Compared to modern vocational trucks full of complicated hydraulics and electronics, the DC100 is like a giant hand tool, simple, heavy, and trustworthy. If something went wrong, you grabbed a hammer, not a laptop. And yet, as tough as it was, our next track too. Now close your eyes and imagine your perfect American big rig. Long nose, big chrome bumper, square grille, dual round headlights, tall stacks. That mental picture you just had, there's a good chance it looks a lot like a Peterbilt 359, launched in 1967 and built until 1987. The 359 became the flagship long-hood truck for Peterbilt and one of the most loved rigs ever built. Peterbilt was already known for using aluminum in frames and cabs to save weight, and the 359 continued that tradition, letting drivers haul more payload within legal limits. The cab had that famous Corvette dash, and the styling was so sharp that the truck ended up as a star in movies and trucking posters. Underneath, you could spec a range of engines, but many enthusiasts remember big Cummins and Caterpillar diesels paired with 13 or 18-speed manuals. The 359 didn't just take you from A to B, it made you feel like you were piloting a piece of rolling art. When production ended, Peterbilt even built a limited run of numbered last edition 359s. To say goodbye properly on those special trucks are hugely valuable today. Even now, people spend crazy amounts of money fully restoring or customizing 359s, sometimes dropping over 6 figures on paint, chrome, and frame-off rebuilds. That kind of passion tells you one thing: No modern truck has truly replaced what the 359 means to drivers, and if the 359 is beauty, the next truck is pure toughness with a bulldog on the hood to prove it. When you see a Mack B61, you don't need a logo to know what it is. The rounded fenders, the tall grille, and the chrome bulldog on the hood say it all. The B-Series ran from 1953 to 1966, and the B61 quickly became one of the best-known models in the lineup. Many B61s were powered by Mack's own END673 inline-6 diesel, around 11.0 to 11.6 liters, built more for torque and durability than for headline horsepower. These trucks hold everything: cement, fuel, containers, and logging loads. Double-clutch gearboxes, heavy axles, and simple suspensions made them rugged and reliable. They didn't pamper the driver, but they rewarded skill. Today, a surprising number of B61s are still around. Some restored to show condition, others still working on farms and small fleets. That's the sort of lifespan that makes you question how long today's plastic-heavy, sensor-packed rigs will really last. It's one thing to build a truck that's quiet and comfortable. It's another thing to build one that can work for half a century. And yet, as legendary as the B61 is, the final truck on our journey might just be the one that people still whisper about as the king of the road. Now imagine the late 1970s, big hoods, bold stripes, and a trucking industry in full swing. Ford decides it's time to step into the premium heavy-duty world in a serious way, and out of that ambition comes the Ford LTL9000. This wasn't just another fleet truck. It was Ford's answer to the long hood big boys from Kenworth and Peterbilt. The LTL9000 came with long, clean lines and a massive hood stuffed with serious power, often big Cummins or Caterpillar inline-6 diesels with well over 400 horsepower and mountains of torque. It was aimed squarely at owner-operators who wanted comfort, power, and presence. The long sleeper cabins could be outfitted like rolling bedrooms, and the air-ride suspension made life on rough American highways a lot more bearable. Ford eventually left the heavy truck market, which means the LTL9000 had a limited production run compared to other long hood legends. That rarity turned it into something special. Among old-school drivers and collectors, a clean LTL9000 is like treasure. Some of these rigs have documented over 1 million miles on original drivetrains, proof that when Ford decided to go big, they did it right. Today, you'll still see a few in classic shows or even quietly hauling regional loads, turning heads from people who know what they're looking at. It's a reminder that sometimes, the best machines come from short chapters in history that leave a huge impact. So, after this trip down the highway of history, you can probably feel the pattern. These old trucks weren't just vehicles. They were partners. They were built in an era when engineers used more steel than plastic, when a driver's toolkit mattered as much as a dealership, and when a truck's personality was just as important as its fuel economy. Modern rigs are amazing in their own way: quieter, safer, cleaner, and more efficient. But there's one thing they can't download, install, or update: soul. The classics earned their place through decades of hard work. Miles, breakdowns, rebuilds, and stories told in truck stops at 3 a.m. That's a kind of legacy no touchscreen can replace. Now I want to hear from you. Which one of these legends stole your heart? Was it the rough and ready White Freightliner cabover, the beautiful Peterbilt 359, the tough Mack B61, or the disappearing icon, the Kenworth W900? Drop your favorite in the comments, tell your story, and let's keep this history alive, driver to driver. And if you enjoy stepping back into the golden age of trucking like this, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next time we bring another legendary machine back to life on your screen. The story you just heard was told from a second-person perspective, speaking directly to you as if you were riding along in the passenger seat, so you feel like part of the journey instead of just listening to a list of facts. Throughout the script, I used hooks at the start of each segment, curiosity gaps like "wait until you meet" and "the next one," and emotional comparisons between old and modern trucks to keep you wondering what's coming next. I also used short scene-style descriptions: night highways, logging roads, truck shows to help you picture each rig clearly without needing technical diagrams. This script is best used for a YouTube video around 12 to 15 minutes long, with a calm but confident pacing, letting viewers enjoy exterior shots, interior tours, and rolling footage of each truck while the voiceover tells the story in a relaxed, conversational style. Have you ever looked at an old truck rolling past and thought, how is that thing still working? The paint is faded, the chrome is pitted, but it sits on the road like it owns it. Meanwhile, brand new trucks are sitting in dealer bays waiting for some tiny sensor to be replaced. That's the crazy thing about old iron. It may not have Bluetooth or digital dashboards, but it has something you can't code: presence. So tonight, I want you to imagine something. You're standing at a truck stop off an old interstate. A modern aero rig glides by, quiet and smooth. Then you hear it, a deeper growl, a more raw sound. A long hood or flat nose classic pulls in, engine clattering, brakes hissing, frame creaking. Every driver in the lot turns their head. That's the kind of energy we're diving into. You and I are about to meet a new lineup of old-school American trucks that can still embarrass modern machines when it comes to durability, character, and soul. Some of these are forgotten workhorses, others are cult icons. A few are so rare that when they pop up for sale, fans will empty bank accounts just to drag them home, ready to climb up into the cab. Let's roll. Let's start with a model that quietly ruled job sites and highways for decades. The Maca model, built from the mid-1960s, all the way into the 2000s in some forms. It's one of the longest-running heavy truck designs ever made. This thing replaced the famous Mac B series and became the backbone of construction fleets, dump operations, and regional haul outfits. Pop the hood and you'd usually find a Maxidine inline 6 diesel tuned for massive torque at low RPM. Drivers loved it because you didn't have to shift constantly. The engine pulled strong through a wide range. The one-piece tilting fiberglass hood gave access to everything, making repairs fast and straightforward. Long before serviceability became a buzzword, the cab was basic but tough, with that upright windshield and no-nonsense interior. Today you still see our models hauling gravel, pulling laboys, or working snowplow duty in small towns. Think about that, a design from the 1960s still earning its keep in the 2020s. That's not nostalgia. That's what happens when you overbuild something and give it to drivers who know how to keep it alive. If you think that's impressive, wait until you meet the big GM brute that showed up late to the party and left way too soon. Now picture the late 1970s, chrome everywhere, big stripes on the doors, and diesel prices climbing. GMC decides it's time to go Elin on a true heavy-duty highway tractor, and the result is the GMC General. Built from 1977 to 1987, it was the largest conventional semi-truck GMC ever made. Under that long hood you could spec serious engines from Caterpillar, Cummins, or Detroit Diesel, all mounted on a heavy ladder frame meant for Class 8 work. Fleets used Generals for everything from regional freight to dump and mixer duty. They never quite sold in the same numbers as Kenworths or Peterbilts, but the people who ran them will tell you one thing: they were solid. When GM partnered with Volvo and exited the heavy truck game in the late 80s, the General disappeared, which made survivors rare. Today, when a clean General shows up at an auction or a show, it draws a crowd. It's the truck equivalent of a band that only released one great album and then vanished. The fans are hardcore because they know they'll probably never see anything like it from GMC again. But if you like short, stubby noses and engines right under your feet, our next rig is going to be your favorite. Imagine climbing almost straight up into the cab, flipping forward the whole front end to get to the engine, and sitting with your knees practically over the grille. That's the world of the classic Cabova. And few Cabovas are as legendary as the international Transstar CO4070 and Transstar 2. In the late 1960s and 70s, these trucks ruled the interstates when strict length laws made Cabovas the kings of freight. International's Transstar Cabovas came with a wild range of engines: Detroit Diesel 8V71 and 8V9 22-stroke V8, Caterpillar 3406 inline 6s, and big Cummins power plants, some rated for gross weights over 140,000 pounds in special setups. These trucks weren't about comfort. The ride was rough. The engine heat came right through the doghouse, and the noise was constant. But the payoff was simple: maximum trailer length and tight maneuvering in cramped city docks. Today, Cabovas have almost disappeared from US highways, but classic Transtars are making a small comeback at shows and in YouTube restoration builds. People are drawn to that flat face and the drama of tilting the whole cab with hydraulic rams just to check the oil. When you see one chugging along with a fresh coat of paint, it feels like the 1970s just punched through time and merged with the present. If that sharp-nosed International feels old, wait until you meet the Cabova that many drivers still talk about with a little sparkle in their eyes. Now, let's talk about the Kenworth K100, the flat-faced sibling of the famous W900. While the W900 grabbed attention with its long hood, the K1000 owned the world of Cabova. It was designed to squeeze every inch of trailer length out of strict regulations, while still giving drivers decent living space up front. The K100 came with big power, just like its long hood brother Cummins, Detroit Diesel, and later more modern engines, backed by 13 and 18-speed manual transmissions that rewarded skill. The K100 became a TV star too, thanks to shows and movies that loved its futuristic flat-faced look blasting down American highways. In real life, it was a favorite of fleets that ran coast-to-coast freight, especially years ago when many states still punished long conventional hoods with shorter legal overall lengths. As rules changed and aero conventionals took over, the K100 quietly faded out of production in the US. Yet if you ask older drivers about the K100 is usually one of the first names they drop. Today, restored K100s with polished tanks, custom paint, and modern interiors are social media gold. They may ride rougher and run harder than modern rigs, but they have something that keeps people watching: attitude. But Kenworth wasn't the only one playing the Cabova game. Peterbilt brought its own legend to the fight. Think of the classic American co-poster truck, and you'll probably picture something very close to a Peterbilt 352 with its squared-off cab, horizontal grille bars, and twin round headlights. The 352 looked like a rolling brick made of steel and chrome. It came out in the 1960s and evolved into a favorite for long-haul operators, especially in the 70s and early 80s. Under that cab, you could order serious power from Cummins and Caterpillar, tied to fuller manual transmissions that demanded real driver skill. The 352 also offered larger sleeper options over time, turning the cab into a compact but workable home for weeks on the road. Like other cabovas, it faded as length laws relaxed and drivers pushed for smoother riding conventionals. But the legend never died. Today, 352s are prime candidates for custom builds, chopped roofs, stretched frames, wild paint jobs. Every time one rolls into a truck show, people pull out their phones. It's the kind of truck where even non-truck people say, "Whoa, what is that?" Modern cabovas exist in other parts of the world, but none quite capture that 352 vibe. And while we're talking icons, we can't forget the more humble rigs that quietly built America one small job at a time. Not every legend is a long hood or a big cabot. Some of the most loved old trucks are the medium-duty workhorses that never went far from home. Think about the old Ford F600 and F700 from the 1960s through the 1980s. These trucks delivered fuel, hauled grain, carried flatbed loads, and pulled small dumps in every corner of the country. Under their medium-sized hoods, you'd find tough gasoline V8 South or inline-6 diesels, strong enough to lug heavy loads up back roads without complaining. Farmers and small businesses loved them because you didn't need a dealer network or a laptop. You just needed a local mechanic and some patience. Many of these old F-Series medium duties are still alive, wearing faded company logos and patched up bodies, quietly working on farms or serving as backup trucks. They'll never get movie roles or big show trophies. But if you grew up in a rural area, there's a good chance one of these Fords was the first big truck you ever rode in, and that kind of memory sticks. But what if you wanted a truck that did all of that, and also looked mean enough to scare a modern pickup out of the fast lane? That's where classic Chevy and GMC square body heavy pickups and chassis cabs come in. From the early 1970s through the 1980s, GM built an entire generation of boxy CK trucks that became legends for ranch work, towing, and off-road abuse. You'd see them as single rear or dual rear wheel rigs, sometimes stretched into small dumps or tow trucks. Engines like the 350 small block V8, the big block 454, and later the 6.2-liter diesel gave them plenty of grunt for their size. These trucks weren't perfect, they rusted, they drank fuel, and some of the early diesels were slow, but their frames and axles were tough, and they were simple to keep running. Today, square-body Chevys and GMCs are exploding in value. People buy them to restore, to lift, to slam, or to just keep working with a bit more style. They've become social media stars as well, with whole channels dedicated to rescuing them from fields and barns. It's proof that even the everyday trucks of the past are now seen as something special in a world of plastic bumpers and massive grills. But to close this trip out, we need one more big rigger truck that bridged the old and new eras and quietly became a favorite of hardcore haulers. Look at photos of American highways in the late 80s and 90s, and you'll often spot a familiar face: the Freightliner FLD. The FLD line showed up around the late 1980s as a more modern, yet still very traditional, conventional truck with a squared-off hood and clean lines. It wasn't as radical as today's aero trucks, but it started pushing designs in that direction. Underneath, the FLD could be spec'd with big horsepower from Detroit, Cummins, or Caterpillar, and it quickly became popular for long-haul and regional fleets. Drivers liked that it still felt like a real truck, with a long hood and classic proportions, but it offered better aerodynamics and nicer interiors than many older rigs. Over time, the FLD was replaced by more rounded wind-cheating models, but it never lost its loyal following. Today, older FLDs are a kind of sweet spot, modern enough to be comfortable and capable of pulling with the big boys, but simple enough to wrench on without needing a dealer laptop for every little thing. It's the truck equivalent of that solid pair of work boots you keep wearing even after you buy something newer and fancier. When you step back and look at all these machines, the Mac R model, the GMC General, the International Transtar Cabot, the Kenworth K100, the Peterbilt 352, the old Ford mediums, the square-body GM workhorses, and the Freightliner FLD, you start to see a pattern. These trucks came from an era where engineers expected them to be rebuilt, not replaced. Frames were thick, cabs were simple, engines were designed to be repaired in the field, not just swapped at a dealer. Modern trucks are faster, quieter, cleaner, and safer. That's a win for drivers and the planet, no doubt. But somewhere along the way, we lost a little bit of that mechanical honesty. You don't talk to a modern truck the way drivers talk about these old beasts. You just plug it in and wait for a code. So here's the big question for you. If you had the chance to restore just one of these classics and keep it forever, which one would you choose? Would you go for a screaming cabover like the K100 or Transtar, a long hood hero like the General or FLD, or a humble old Ford or GM farm rig that just refuses to die? Tell me in the comments which one stole your heart. And if you've got a story about riding or driving one of these, I want to hear it. And if you enjoy stepping back into the world of real steel, real sound, and real driving, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next time we bring another forgotten legend back to life on your screen. Narrative perspective used. The entire script is written in second person, speaking directly to you as if you're standing at the truck stop or climbing into each cab, so you feel involved in the journey instead of just listening to a list of specs. Storytelling devices. Used. I used sensory hooks at the start, sounds, sights, and feelings. Curiosity gaps, like wait until you meet, to keep you watching, and constant comparisons between old and modern trucks to build emotional contrast. Each truck segment starts with a little scene or image, then layers in simple facts, a reason it mattered, and a legacy or fun twist about why people still care today.